Okay, welcome to the second tutorial. We're in Module 3 and we're making road signs. So once you've opened up the template file, you're going to look like this in your Adobe Illustrator program. You've got roadsigns.ai opened and you'll have a template. You'll notice that if you go into your layers window, the road sign layers are all on one layer, and we can lock that layer. And we actually want to create a new layer, and that will be where our artwork lives, on layer 2. So you notice that you can turn the road sign layer on and off with the little visibility symbol, and again our artwork will be on layer 2. So we're going to zoom in, and what we want to work on today is really just showing you how the pen tool works. The whole idea with this assignment is that you use the pen tool to create your pictograms. This is the pen tool right here. It's the third tool down on the left hand side of your tool bar, and it's got some companions. You can't really use it alone, so let's talk about how we use it. First of all, if we select the pen tool and we click once and click twice, you get a simple line. Similar thing that you could make with the line tool. The thing with the pen tool is if we click again and a third time, right back on the original anchor point, now we've got a shape. And this is a shape that we couldn't make with any of our shape tools. It's a triangle, but it could have been any shape, really. If I selected the pen tool again and I did a few more clicks, you can see that, with simple shapes you can make them as complex as you want using the pen tool. So that's the basics of how you draw with the pen tool. Now it gets a little bit more complicated because there's some other tools involved. First of all, let's start with the idea of making a curved line with the pen tool. So if I click on the pen tool and I click and then once and then I click and drag, you'll notice that I get a curved line, and I click again, and that's how I can create an arc. If I click and drag again and then close up that shape by clicking on the original anchor point, now I've got a shape with two angular points and two curved points. Now let's use the direct select tool, the white arrow, and we'll notice that as we select an anchor point, you can adjust the anchor point. So here we have a basic square that I made with the rectangle tool. It's actually a rectangle, and I just want to demonstrate that the way the pen tool works is basically this is a path. I could have made this rectangle with the pen tool. It's just that the rectangle makes it more easily. But the direct select tool works in exactly the same way. So just because this is a rectangle, I can still select the points individually. These are called anchor points, and I can turn what was a rectangle into any other shape by stretching the points. Furthermore, if I select my pen tool, I can now add, and I mouse along the path, I can add anchor points. And what this means, if I add 4 anchor points and I go to my direct select tool, I can go from a square to virtually some other shape. The next step is understanding about converting tools, and as you know, this toolbar up here refers to whatever is selected in my whatever object is selected. So if I select an anchor point, like so, I can convert that anchor point into a curve. There's two kinds of anchor points, curves and angles. And now I've got curved anchor points here and here. And you can see that with the curved anchor points, I have what's called a handle. And you'll need to experiment and practice with this to really feel comfortable using the pen tool. And it can be really challenging at first. So I encourage you to give it some time. So we're back with our triangle and eyeball shape, and to recap a little bit, there's two arrows up here, the selection tool and the direct selection tool, and they work differently. The selection tool, the black arrow, grabs objects. I can move either object that I have on this artboard. With the direct select tool, I can grab anchor points. And that's going to be a theme that recurs throughout this class. We need to get in tune with the black arrow being our object selection and the white arrow being a more refined selection tool, in this case the anchor points. So one thing that we can do here, if we want to sort of top off this triangle in order to place the eyeball down and create an all-seeing eye sort of icon, roughly, what we can do is grab the pen tool, create two more anchor points along the side of the triangle, and hold down the pen tool, and we see a delete anchor point option. And we'll just select our top one. It will be deleted. With our white arrow, we can adjust that to how we want it. Move the rest of the triangle into place. And in order to make this look a little bit more eyeball-like, we will maybe put a circle in the middle of it. Down here you can swap the fill and the stroke. So I say I have a black stroke and no fill. If I swap it, I can go to the opposite, and I think I also want to copy and paste that, have another circle that I'll swap back to be just the fill, or just the outline, excuse me. Put that right down in there. And I've got a pictogram going on. It needs some work. It's still rough, but you can get the idea. So one of the last things I want to demonstrate here is how to join paths that are independent of one another. This is three separate lines, and right now they can only be treated as three separate objects. In order to function in the way that we've been playing with objects with the pen tool using our direct select arrow, we want to join these two. And just moving them over top of one another doesn't actually work. If we zoom way in, we can see that actually this is still two lines. So putting them on top of one another does not work. What we need to do is select the points with our white arrow and that are at the corner here, and say object, path, join. And by doing that, we will get a corner that we can then treat as we did in our other examples. Similarly, we could select, if we wanted to join these two lines, we could select one anchor point, hold shift, and select another anchor point, and then do the same thing, object, path, join, and Illustrator will actually create a line between those two. Now that means that you have this other anchor point that you may or may not want. If you don't want it, you do your delete anchor point tool with the pen and it goes away. Now you see that we went from having 3 lines to having one path that can be treated in the same way. And we could take that funky shape into being a triangle by doing the same thing again, selecting the point, object, path, join, and now we have a single object made from 3 lines using the join function. Okay, the final thing I want to demonstrate in this little tutorial are 2 more tools that are useful here. One is the blob brush over here, and the other is the lasso tool, which you may know if you're a Photoshop user. However, in Illustrator it works differently, and I want to talk about that. So the blob brush is a pretty cool tool because it works kind of like the paintbrush or the pencil. Your mouse movements, it tracks your mouse movements and you can draw on the fly. So if I draw a little zigzag like so, that's all well and good. If this was the pencil tool, this would only have outline. But the way that this tool works is that it actually creates a full shape with fill and outline with the mouse movement. So it's different in that way from the paintbrush or the pencil. And what that means is that all these anchor points are outside anchor points, and it has, I can create with that shape that I just made an actual path that is only outline, and I can treat it just like with all my other shapes using the direct select to adjust the location and dynamics of the anchor points. So I can turn this shape into anything that I want, but the blob brush allows me to have a starting point that is freehand for making outline shapes. Now to demonstrate the lasso tool, since we're working in vector graphics, not raster graphics, there's a difference. When you use the lasso tool in Photoshop, you're selecting pixels, and you're basically working with pixels in Photoshop. There are no pixels in Illustrator. These are paths and vectors, and it's all algorithmic, and that's why we can scale up infinitely and have the same resolution. But the key here with the lasso tool is that the lasso tool selects anchor points. That's what it does. So if I lasso these anchor points, you can see that they are pink, they're red, whereas these ones are white. So these are the selected ones. And now when I grab my white arrow, I will drag all of these anchor points out, not just individual ones. And that's just an important thing to understand because it's useful. To demonstrate that again with these anchor points here, I want to drag all of them all at once and sort of expand this shape down. And you can see that I've gone from that squiggly line to some other sort of shape that's undefined right now, but all in a few clicks using the lasso tool and my direct select tool. So let's recap. The pen tool can do singular anchor points like so. If you click and drag the pen tool, you can make curved anchor points, and you can also convert existing anchor points by selecting them with the white arrow and using the convert function in your top toolbar. Curved anchor point. Okay, finally we can use the direct select tool to make adjustments to individual anchor points, which changes the shape. And we can use the lasso tool to select multiple anchor points in order to change multiple points at once. So with that, you should get on your way to making pictograms in this road sign template. It's a fun project. It's challenging because the pen tool is a difficult tool to learn to use at first, but it's keep in mind that this is really about learning the basics so that we can employ them in more interesting projects as we move on to future modules.